British values, as defined by the UK government and embedded in our country's education system, are democracy, the rule of law, individual liberty, mutual respect, and tolerance of people of different beliefs. And most recently, we were told by the Prime Minister that diversity too is a British value.
What is it to be British? And I believe to be British is to be compassionate, reasonable, live and let live, and diverse. And I am proud to serve our diverse country and all of its parts.
It is British to be diverse.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that until the 1950s, the UK was described as overwhelmingly white, with the white population estimated at over 99%, and according to The Guardian, only a few tens of thousands of non-whites. Now, was this non-diverse Britain not really British? Was this a country that was not worth fighting for? Did my children's great-granddad, who fought the Nazis, not British enough? Now, I am someone who came to this country as an immigrant. I came from Egypt, and my wife is English. I have come to know British values through not only studying history, but actually interacting with the indigenous people of this country, like my wife. Now, I have a major problem with the values the government wants to shove down our throats. And that problem is, when you look at these values, you're going to find that they are passive, lifeless, and uninspiring. All these values suggest is, there is nothing expected from anyone who is, like my wife, indigenously British, or someone like me who wants to become British. All you have to do is just accept people of different beliefs. Just accept whatever the government does. Keep your head down and do nothing. According to these values and our government, anyone essentially can become British while sitting on their sofa watching TV and picking their nose. All you need to do is just accept that Britain is diverse. Okay, there's not much you need to do. There is not much expected from you. You need to accept that there is the rule of law, so basically don't commit crime. Well, fine. Most people don't commit crime anyway, and that's globally anywhere. Whether you look at Egypt, whether you look at India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, most people do not commit crime against their own laws. Obviously they have a different set of laws and traditions and values, but most people are not criminals. So that's essentially the rule of law. So the challenge with these values as well is that, these are values that we share with the French, the Germans, the Dutch, and almost every Western European democracy. So, for example, the French have democracy. The Germans have the rule of law. The Dutch have their own, individual liberty. The French have democracy. So it doesn't really set us apart. But as I said, as someone who comes from an immigrant background and is now a British citizen, I think there are 5 real British values that truly set this country apart. Well, this country and its people. Number 1 is innovation. So Britain invented rail travel, the World Wide Web, the radio, TV, penicillin, the jet engine, the radar, and the ATM. Essentially, Britain invented the world as we know it today. If you travel by train, that's thanks to Britain. If you use the internet, that is thanks to Britain. If you listen to some music on the radio, watch TV, travel by airplane, that's also thanks to Britain. The second value is creativity. Britain has shaped the world's imagination and captured millions of hearts. And this is something that I know as someone who comes from Egypt. My brother and everyone I know in Egypt loved Harry Potter. There is also the Chronicles of Narnia, The Tale of Peter Rabbit, The Lord of the Rings, The Beatles, Amy Winehouse, and my personal favorite, Only Fools and Horses. So when you look at this, you're going to realize that the British are innovative, creative, but also there are 3 more values that really set the British apart. Hard work. That's the third one. I believe that regardless of what your politicians tell you, the people of this country work really hard. Everyone really does. And this is why, you're going to find that people really love, people who, are in trades, people who work hard, people who, a man in a van and all that stuff. The British really admire them. They really admire, the people of this country really admire anyone who's hard worker, anyone who, who loves to put in all they've got in the work they do. But also, Britain is compassionate, which sets us apart, I think, from our friends in the US. Britain likes to help anyone struggling. There is not this concept of, you're on your own. No, you're not on your own. This is a country that is compassionate. This is a country that's willing to help anyone who's truly struggling, truly and genuinely struggling. But this is also a country that despises freeloaders. And that's the difference that we need to make. Now, the fourth value is tradition. And I think this is, in my view, the one that really sets this country apart. We have our pubs, we have our monarchy, we have our church, we have our humility, and we have our family values. You're going to find when you're dealing with the British that it's really un-British, and it's sort of looked down on if you are someone who brags, if you are someone who likes to say, look how much money I've got, if you're someone who likes to say, look how massive and big my house is. This is extremely un-British. In Britain, we don't build the biggest houses. In Britain, we don't, buy the shiniest stuff. We find that stuff to be actually quite tacky, and most people just don't feel like they like it. But in this country, we build things that are, they have a character, things that are meant to last, things that, are different, things that are modest. A nice small pub where you can just have a drink and sit by the fire is something that almost everyone in this country loves. Well, everyone who truly embraces this country's, values and spirit loves. And we also have our family values. You're going to look up and down the country, you're going to see that most people do appreciate family values. So tradition is a massive value that I think really defines this country. Now, the last one, which I believe is significant, is justice and fairness. We have the rule of law, we have democracy, we have individual liberty, we have mutual respect and tolerance to people who are different. Yes, these values too are British. In fact, the Magna Carta transformed these ideas from just aspirational demands, things that everyone wanted to have, into what we call today Western civilization. So yes, I believe that Western civilization is pretty much British, if you ask me. Look, it's great being tolerant, it's great being kind, it's great welcoming people who genuinely like this country, who genuinely care for this country, for its people, for its values, for its history, for its tradition, for, everything. This is one of the most beautiful countries I've ever seen. And I think, all these values of tolerance, mutual respect, the rule of law, democracy, they are values that represent Western civilization. They are actually, according to the UN Charter, according to, different international laws, these are universal values. These are human values that we share with most Western liberal democracies. But sadly, they don't define or reflect Britain's history and its uniqueness. I think that Britain and its people have a lot more to give. The indigenous people of this country and people like me who made the choice to truly become British, to embrace true British values, to fight for these values, to fight for Britain's national security, to fight for Britain's spirit, for Britain's soul, for Britain's future. We deserve a lot more from our politicians. We deserve a lot more from our media. We deserve a lot more from our academics and our elite. But honestly, I do think that the version of the British values that the government promotes and again shoves down our throats is a sham. It doesn't inspire anyone to do anything. If you tell someone that, it's British to be tolerant, it's British to accept people of different beliefs, okay, this is something that most people will do. They will just sit at home and be like, okay, so I'll just mind my business and I'm not going to be a racist. That's fine. It's the bare minimum. But when you tell someone it's British to have innovation, it's British to have creativity, it's British to be hardworking, it's British to be, to have tradition, it's British to believe in justice and fairness, you're going to inspire people to become the best version of themselves. And you're going to truly do this by embracing a version of British values that reflects Britain's uniqueness and Britain's proud history, and hopefully give future generations a Britain that everyone is truly proud of.